Please rise for invocation. Pastor Austin Trammell of Salty Church.
Pray with me. Lord God, first and foremost, I just thank you for being you, for being God, for being gracious and loving and merciful and compassionate to all of us. Even though we haven't deserved it, you've given us far more than we could ever ask for. I want to thank you for Councilman Bob Ford and his life and all that he did to impact this community and beyond. Pray for his family and friends during this time, and all of our council today as they might be struggling with the loss of a great friend. So Lord, I pray that you fill them up just with the energy and the peace that they need to make it through the night. Lord, and as their family and friends go through this time together, I pray that you put the people in their lives to help them through this journey, to point them on the right path towards you. But Lord, specifically for tonight, we just pray for wisdom and discernment for all these great people standing in front of me, to give them the opportunity to lead this community well, to make the decisions that need to be made to make everything better in this community. Lord God, we thank you for all that you do for each and every one of us. Thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, and all that he did for us to give us eternal life. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the roll.
Councilman Bastian?
Here.
Councilman Stiltner?
Here.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Here.
Mayor Burnette?
Here. Presentation of proclamation to the 2018 city retirees. Paul Lockerbie was with us earlier. We had a reception for the last year's retirees. We had a couple people expected. One was not able to make it, but we were able to honor Paul Lockerbie today. Aaron McElrath, who we'd expected, got caught in Orlando, but I think it's important, and I'm glad that it is still a tradition in Port Orange, the first meeting of the year, we honor our retirees from years past. Rules of procedure, local rules. We have some proposed changes. Jake, item 5, if you could just highlight those for us, and then I will entertain a motion.
I'm going to pass this to Robin, who drafted most of this. So with Matt, go ahead, Robin.
So most of the changes are just kind of putting into practice what we actually, or into paper what we actually practice. I guess the biggest change in here, in my opinion anyway, is changing the public participation from 15 minutes to 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then not requiring a full address of our public who come to the podium, but just requiring them to state the city of residence instead.
Like it.
Some other things were just kind of cleanup type items, but if you guys have any questions.
All of those were in our package and highlighted, and I appreciate getting to meet with both of you, and just to let you know my thoughts. I wanted to make sure that we added a little bit of time to public participation, because sometimes we flirt with that 15-minute barrier, and I don't want to unintentionally cut the ability of the public. But if at any point in time we can always, I mean, what our rules would say is if you've got 20 minutes, they have a maximum of 3 minutes. So if you have a large number of people, all of a sudden you're cutting that 3-minute number down because you're dividing that 20 minutes by the number of people here. Now, if council ever wants to amend that and add more because we have a heavy response, so that we give everybody a full 3 minutes, we can do that per case-by-case basis. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that we held to the spirit of the rules, that we allowed plenty of time for people.
And we can always have them. I mean, we could do it right at the dais.
Absolutely.
Allow them to finish if
they have
necessary.
a salient point, we want to hear it.
Yeah. Okay.
With that, any questions of council on that?
No, I read through it. I mean, it's minor stuff, but it makes sense.
I will entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Anybody else like to speak to this? Come on, Robert.
Mayor, council members, Robert Reinhagen, 1425 Dexter Drive, Port Orange. My concern is with the city manager and the city attorney comments. Whether you call them comments or items, irrelevant, but if they're significant, I really believe they need to be agenda items with proper supporting backup information. And I would like to see you put in the procedure a requirement that no votes are permitted except on, no votes that would expend funds or agree to a proposal or a resolution without being a standard agenda item.
We can't do that.
And that's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this topic? There being none, back to us. Any other comments? There being none, call the roll.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes, 4-0. Public comments on the consent agenda items. Anything, items 7 through 14. If anybody has any comments, would like to come forward now. Nobody has any comments on those. Before we do agenda approval, I would like to, somebody to motion to pull items 11 and 13. And if there's anybody else who wants to pull.
I was gonna motion to pull 11 anyway, so I'll just make the motion to pull both.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
11 and 13.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who said.
Motion,
Okay.
Councilman
Stiltner.
Bastian, seconded by Councilman Stiltner.
Got it.
We have a motion to pull items 11 and 13. All, once again, all signify in the affirmative by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. 11 and 13 is pulled. May I have a motion for the approval of the balance of the consent agenda?
Move to approve the balance.
Second.
Well,
He's been on.
he's quick. Come on, Mr. Vice Mayor, you gotta pick up your game there, bud.
That's one, I'll let him win.
Okay, all right. We'll see how the rest of the evening goes here. With that, call the roll, please.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes. Jake, there was a minor change to item 11 before we move forward with that. I just wanted you to highlight that.
Yes, sir. The agreement that that the wood carvers and the city manager made was for the use of the adult annex for 2 days. It would be a 2-day wood carvers or a wood show, and I believe the original contract said 1, or the original agreement. So we sent you a change that gave it a 2-day for payment in kind, and we did agree to that.
Okay.
In my office, so that was just a admin mistake.
Okay. Any other questions on that?
No, I knew that, and I mean, I read through it. The only reason I was gonna pull it to give John the opportunity just to come up and pitch his event. You know, while he has the television stage, he can tell everybody who he is and when the event is and time frame.
There you go, John. You've got at least one fan up here. Come on up.
You've done it now, Drew.
Hey, he puts in a lot of work. There's
Oh, goodness.
beautiful totem pole out here out back that they did, and they do great work.
You do.
My name's John Carlton. I live here in the city of Port Orange. I'm a member of the Friends Carving Club, which is what this contract is for. I'm also a member of the Volusia Woodworkers Guild, who's actually also working on the same project with us. They've got some additional members that are helping us out. Excuse me, helping us out. The contract that we're signing is allowing us to do carving shows. This year, it's going to be this coming Sunday, the 13th, down at the Adult Center, and it's going to be a 1-day show. Hopefully, this becomes successful and the art world likes it enough where we can expand it to be a 2-day show, and that's the reason for the contract to be a 2-day show. So.
What time Sunday?
It's going to be from 9 to 4.
Perfect.
Of course, we're in there before and after
Yeah.
to set up and take down.
Very
And
good.
going to be food vendors. And in addition to the Friends Carving Club, the Deltona Wood Carving Club is going to be there, the Palm Coast Wood Carve will be there, and the Volusia Woodworkers Guild will be there. So you have 4 different clubs that will be displaying, selling items, showing you their works and wares.
Very cool.
I would ask you that you do us this one favor. If somebody can share some pictures with us, wouldn't mind being able to share some pictures on our website, maybe on the Parks and Rec page, on the Facebook page or something. So
That
share,
would,
share what you guys do.
We'd like to have shared that for about a month, so we'd have that advertisement, but
Yeah.
that's no problem. The Parks and Recs have been outstanding helping us with it. They did put it on their Facebook page or whatever else they got within the city. We've had a few different clubs that have put it on their pages and stuff. Got a small article in the News Journal, but you know.
I would hope if our Port Orange Observer reporter is listening right now, she might
is.
want to write a little blurb about it if you haven't already. So.
And like I say, we hope this to be a success. We can increase this thing to a.
It's right up her alley.
It'll be a 2-day show, and but there should be some pretty nifty pieces of art there.
All right.
Thanks,
Cool.
John.
John, appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Did we get a motion yet, Robin? May I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve item number 11.
Second.
We have a motion second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? There being none, motion carries. Item 13, approval of lease with U.S. Representative Michael Waltz. I wanted that pulled, if nothing else. I wanted to make mention that United States Congressman or Congresswoman from this area, whoever it has been for at least the last 20 years, has had their congressional office in our city hall, and that is going to continue. That there's no given. A congressperson can put their office anywhere in the district, or not at all if they wish, but certainly to service their constituents, it's important that they have an access point, and I'm proud to let everybody know that that tradition is going to continue here, and Congressman Waltz's district office in the area will continue to be in the same spot as our past congresspeople have been, upstairs on the second floor here in City Hall.
Yep. As soon as you go through the double doors, it's right in front of you.
Right in front of you. With that, may I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries. With that, item 15, Jake, Robin, I have a procedural question. Did we simply reschedule that, or did we table that?
Rescheduled.
Okay, so there's no motion required. We can go right to it.
Correct.
Request for Tariq Dalak from Door Master doing business as Overhead Doors of America to waive or reduce the 500 work without permit fee.
Where is he?
I don't see him.
I guess,
Did he not come?
well, that went fast.
Yeah, so it sounds like we notified him twice about today, and this is the third time we've tried to get him on the agenda.
I'm certainly having a very jaded view if he actually comes, and we've already.
Because he was a no-show once and then rescheduled or something, right? Or and no-show tonight.
Okay. All right.
Can we act on it, or do we have to wait, or what do we have to do here?
I don't want to do anything with it.
Okay,
Certainly.
just leave it.
Yeah.
Citizen
You can move to deny, can't you?
Actually, you can
we
act
just
on
move-
it if you'd like.
We can move to deny.
It's,
I'll make a motion to deny request.
A second.
We have a motion to deny the request and second discussion.
The fee had been paid, and then he wanted it to be refund, right? And I mean, I read the backup material. They didn't pull the permit for whatever
he
reason,
didn't pull the permit, he did the garage door,
and then got caught and
and then.
asked for
And
forgiveness.
then paid the permit, he wants the $500
Yeah, no.
refunded because it was an honest mistake. He's done business here, he's never, did we figure out whether he'd ever been fined before? Never been fined before, said it was an honest mistake, communication error. Happens all the time with a lot of people, and they pay it.
That's
and
the problem.
They shoot themselves and go, darn
Yeah.
it, I wish that hadn't happened, and they move on.
And then they don't do it again.
Then there's that.
Any other discussion? Anyone else like to speak to this? There being none, call the roll.
Councilman Bastian.
No.
We,
Wait,
We're
to
voting
deny.
in the affirmative to
Oh,
deny.
to deny.
Motion to deny.
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont.
yes.
Mayor Burnette.
Yes, 4-0. Brings us to citizen participation non-agenda. Robin, do we have any requests?
None.
There being none, moving on to council comments. Before we get into individual comments, because I'm sure that we want to spend a little time talking about Bob, I know that I do. Ponce Inlet, the mayor of Ponce Inlet sent a letter to us requesting that we, and you had that in your packets, the resolution that they passed. They're asking for other cities to pass a similar resolution in support of requesting Representative Tom Leake to loosen state rules and allow home rule, basically letting cities decide from themselves on the short-term rental resolution or short-term rental topic.
This is what they're talking with the Airbnbs and
Yeah.
VRBOs and all that stuff. Okay.
And of course, the
Yeah.
state's position every year has been allowing cities on a wide variety of topics to control
Yeah.
our own fate less and less.
Yeah.
And Ponce Inlet may have a different take on how they want to regulate it than we do, than Holly Hill, than Daytona.
Yeah.
But my position personally is I want them to have that opportunity.
Yeah.
Just the same as I'd like us to have that opportunity, whatever that might be.
It's part of home rule. I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of home rule stuff.
It's kind of how I feel about it. Scott?
Well, it's not only a major home rule issue, but it's also clearly one of those issues that is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all in the state of Florida.
No.
420 municipalities. Anybody that thinks that the state could pass any ordinances regarding that particular issue that would be a one-size-fits-all across the 400-plus cities, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
I can't see how Jacksonville Beach has something in common with Alachua.
exactly right.
Chase, any comment?
Yeah, no, I just agree. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. I lived up in Atlanta for a little while, and you know, during Masters Week, that's a big time. Everybody rents out their house. I mean, it's very profitable for a lot of people, and based on where you're at, I think they should be able to make that decision. So, yeah, I'm all for anytime the local cities can determine for themselves. I'm not a fan of Tallahassee putting stuff on us.
With
I'll happily
that,
support it.
I will give direction, that with consensus from council, give direction to Jake to bring forth a resolution for us to vote on and consider, like the one that Ponce Inlet passed.
Will do, Mayor.
December 22nd. I think all of us were in preparations for Christmas, and got a message that kind of took me by surprise and shock and disappointment and sadness that Bob Ford, longtime public servant in the city, 8+ years as council person for District 1. I sat next to him at every single one of those meetings with save one for 8 years. Before that, from 1986 to 1999, served the city as police chief, came down here from New York, recruited by the city manager at the time, made a lot of changes to help modernize our police department as we became a rapidly growing and evolving city. And very few times does a public servant have the ability to contribute the way he did. And that's just a service to us. He was a professor of criminology at the University of Central Florida, my alma mater. Dr. Ford there, as he was known, made a wide and lasting impact on a lot of lives there. And I would like to read some thoughts and that were written in a bit to him, and then we can all comment. In the News Journal, Councilman Bob Ford died Saturday surrounded by family after his latest battle with cancer. He was 74. Memorial service will be held at a future date, said Ford's wife, Marilyn, in a text message to city leaders. The family appreciates the support and prayers of friends and requests privacy at this time. Ford was, in his 8 years in office, was a strong advocate for transparency and fiscal responsibility in government. Recruited from New York by former longtime city manager Ken Parker in 1986 to run the police department, Ford gave more than 30 years of service to the city of Port Orange. He also taught criminal justice at the University of Central Florida. This is definitely a hit for the Port Orange family, said Mayor Don Burnette when reached by phone. The mayor said that the city will be able to put out more thorough information when offices open back after the holidays. Burnette said the city charter calls for a special election to fill Ford's posts. He was a terrific public servant. Ford's death makes 3 prominent leaders in Port Orange's loss this fall, including State Senator Dorothy Huckel, who died October 2nd after battling cervical cancer. On November 16th, Tracy Stott-Ream, the city's director of finance, died suddenly due to complications from a surgical procedure. Robert Eugene Ford, age 74, of Port Orange, Florida, passed away Saturday, December 22nd, 2018. Robert was born February 11th, 1944. The family has asked that in lieu of flowers, a donation be made to assist students at Bob's undergraduate alma mater. Robert Ford Memorial Fund, P.O. Box 2008, Niagara University, New York, 14109. A celebration of life for Robert will be held Saturday, January 12th, 2019 at 2 p.m. Evolution Memorial Funeral Home, 4815 South Clyde Morris Boulevard in Port Orange. That's this Saturday. Fond memories and expressions of sympathy may be shared at volusiamemorialfuneral.com for the Ford family. As a member of the working press since the mid-1990s, I saw Bob Ford as a decent and caring municipal public servant who transitioned seamlessly from police chief to elected leader. Ford's ideology meant elasticity on the dais. Bob Ford served his constituents with honesty and respect for his 8+ years in elected office. On behalf of my wife, Sarah, prayers and comfort have been made to the Lord for Bob Ford's wife, Marilyn, and his extended family. Bob Ford was a good man who cared about his community. He will be missed but not forgotten. Henry Frederick, online news publisher, headline surfer. Just some thoughts that were shared by individuals online. It was a blessing to work with Dr. Ford in his capacity as a UCF faculty member. He was truly committed to his students and was a constant source of support and encouragement to his UCF family. His light will be missed. May God bless Marilyn Ford and family. Angela Edwards Johnson. The VIPs of Port Orange will miss speaking with him, as there has always been much history there. Bob started the VIP program here in Port Orange. For his years of service as police chief and then as councilman of the city, my condolences to his family. He will be greatly missed. Major Patricia Lamontagne. Dear Mrs. Dr. Ford and family, please know that Chief and Councilman Bob Ford had a great influence in his manner and method of conversing with the VIPs, for which I've been served for a number of years. Chief Ford made us proud of what we do, and he attended so many of our monthly meetings. His telling of episodes to us, making us feel as though we're an integral part of the whole policing team. Losing Councilman and Chief Ford will be a vacuum for those of us still here, but the Lord will have a dedicated, loving hero to welcome in heaven. With sincere sympathy and humility, Jeff and Joanne Schwartz. Marilyn, Anita, and I only saw you and Bob on your visits to Mary and Bob, but the time spent speaking with him on a beautiful late summer night at the club revealed a thoughtful, opinionated, well-informed, and interesting man. We laughed even when we disagreed, agreed and pondered solutions, shared war stories and experiences. May his love help you in this sad time. Mark Weinstein. Dear Marilyn and family, may God's comforting spirit keep your hearts at peace during his time of grief and sorrow over Bob's passing. Such a wonderful husband and human being. Philip Chandler. I could go on and on. That's just a few of the many different aspects to Bob's life as a police chief, as a husband, as a father, as a college professor, as a longtime councilman in the city of Port Orange. I think all of us owned a little different piece of him. I certainly did, and I tell you, I can sit here with certainty and say that after 8 years of sitting next to him before, during, and after meetings, I am going to miss, as much as anything, his sense of humor. A lot of people might not have seen that sitting and watching on TV because he was very serious during a council meeting, but before and after, it's he had a way of keeping things in perspective that's unlike no other individual. He's definitely as unique an individual as they come in Port Orange is going to miss a terrific public servant, and I'm going to miss a friend. And I got to let somebody else speak. Scott.
I was hoping you were going to call on me next. I was reflecting after Bob's passing of all of the ways and the times that Bob had an impact in my life. And it occurred to me that through my life, as it is, I'm sure, with everybody's life, at some point you can reflect back over decades, and probably on one hand, if not maybe two, you can count the true mentors that you've had in your life that were there longer than just a few moments and multiple times, that you had experiences with that have stayed with you and will stay with you forever. And Bob was certainly one of those people to me. Just a quick story. In 1989, I graduated from the Law Enforcement Academy here at Daytona State College. I started in the academy when I was 18, and I was 19, barely 19. The joke was back then that I was old enough to be in law enforcement, but not old enough to buy my own gun and my own bullets. And so you can imagine that at that period of time in our society, hiring 19-year-old law enforcement officers fresh out of the academy, ultimately less than a year removed from high school, was not something that a lot of folks were jumping at the chance to do. Bob had come to the city of Port Orange as the police chief 3 years prior, and he was implementing a lot of changes, a lot of visionary changes, a lot of policy changes. The city was on the verge of tremendous amounts of growth, and clearly there was a need for a different type of policing, and that's what Bob was brought to the city of Port Orange to do. I was a product of that, and blessed that in May of 1989, Bob hired and swore me in as a Port Orange police officer. So while I was very grateful for that opportunity, I never knew what would come the next 30 years. So throughout the next 3 decades of my life and Bob's, he was there, believe it or not, for my 21st birthday party. He attended. How many chiefs do that? Not very many. He was there at my wedding for Julie and I when we got married, him and Marilyn both. 1993, he awarded me Officer of the Year, and made sure that he and Marilyn both sat with Julie and I in the ceremonies.
I saw a picture of you and him when you were named Officer of the Year.
I looked half of what I look like today, right?
You had a little more hair.
I definitely had more hair, yeah.
And he looked just about the same.
Bob and I both had less miles. We'll just leave it at that. Bob promoted me twice in my career. He encouraged me to continue my education, which by and large he was the driving force to get me to do that, not only at the local college, but also through advanced classes and high liability training and things like that. And he actually encouraged me to get into the teaching aspect of law enforcement. And so for quite a bit of time I taught as an adjunct instructor out at Daytona State College, again by and large because of Bob Ford. He retired from the police department in 1999, and through that course of time that I had the honor to serve for Chief Ford. By the way, he'll always be chief to me. I watched Bob wear a lot of different hats, and as he went on to UCF to be a professor, he didn't leave the community very far behind. He kept in touch with a lot of us that had worked with him and for him in a lot of different ways, definitely kept his finger on the city of Port Orange. And then down the road comes a time where I get a phone call from him, and he knew it was kind of towards the end of my shift, and he said, "Why don't you meet me down at Ritter's? I got something I want to tell you." I said, "Okay." So you go and you meet your former chief down at the Ritter's. I'm thinking it's got to be more than buying me an ice cream. And there he sat with a packet of qualifying papers in his hands, and myself and one of the other lieutenants at the police department had met with Bob, and he let us know that he had interest in running for a council position with the city of Port Orange, and gave us the honor to fill out those document cards so he could get his qualifying numbers. And so there was a new chapter and a new hat and a new title for a man that had already carried so many of those. So it was only fitting that when I decided to run for city council in District 4, I did the same. And, you know, so to wrap that up in reflection, to look at my life, to have had somebody with like Bob over 30 years that has helped to guide and mentor me in so many different ways, I could sit here all night and never do justice and thanks and praise, and it's just something that will be with me. He will be a part of my life forever. That's how much of an impact he had on my life. And one of the best things about, and I know you touched on it, one of the things that I don't think people really always grasp unless you were close to Bob was how much he enjoyed the debate and the dialogue. He truly, more than anything, enjoyed that process because Bob was a consummate researcher. You know, in his mind and in his application of going through life and making decisions, Bob looked at a lot of things in a research perspective, knowing how do I make it better, how do I make it more efficient, how do we do it differently, you know? And so, but he was never one that came across with, I'm going to have the idea and it's only going to be my idea and we'll force feed it to make that way. He appreciated putting the concept, the idea, and the vision, and then having others around him kind of help mold that. And that was the great thing. And one of the things Bob never did was take all the credit. He gave the credit where it needed to go, which was typically to the team, you know, or the community. And one of the neat things about him as a police chief, you know, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way to all those that serve in law enforcement in very high level capacities, but you see, you know, chiefs and different ranking officials of different structures all around the country. And man, when they show up, their uniforms, there's more glitz and glamour and brass and awards and stripes and things all over those uniforms. And they look impressive, they look great. But you know, when he was the chief of police, he wore a uniform that had the same badge, the same patch, and the same insignias that the zone officers wore. And his name tag didn't say chief. It said R.E. Ford. And that was something that always stuck with me. You know, and he would show up at a call for service and he would stand beside you. And that was really impressive as a young person to going through that career, to watch somebody like him be there as a mentor and not have that to where it was, you know, an appearance that was overbearing or anything like that. He wanted you to learn the process, but also wanted you to know he was right there if you need him. And so, gonna miss him. This dais is gonna miss him. The city is gonna miss him. But without question, this man has left an incredible mark on this community that I think all of us that'll be a part of all of us in this community for a really, really long time. So my best to Marilyn and Bob's family, and we'll continue to check on them and take care of them as that's needed.
Good stuff there, Scott. Yeah, it's funny how you say, you know, you found it fitting to go let him know you were going to qualify and take the papers. Actually, before I qualified, I reached out to him to see if he would meet with me, and he said absolutely. And I was looking for advice on what I needed to do and everything, and what I thought would be maybe perhaps a 20 or 30 minute talk or meeting turned into 2+ hours. Yeah. Because he was very thorough with, you know, advice and willingly gave advice and you know, what needed to be done and everything, because I really had no clue. So he was one of the first, and he was always willing to help. And like you said, he'd be on calls, you know, with you guys and standing right next to you. And there were many times we'd go to different fire calls, medical calls, car crashes, whatever, and up would pop Bob Ford. If an officer wasn't available in the immediate area, and he showed up just to kind of have our back at the fire department. I saw him on many calls, many more calls than you'd think. You know, the chief of police would have no interest in showing up. He would be there, and that was, you know, always appreciated. But you know, with Bob's passing on the 22nd, we just didn't lose a public servant. We lost a legendary public servant. You know, 15, 16 years as chief of police, 8 years there, you know, well over 2 decades of his life just to Port Orange. Over almost 4 decades of his life total service, but well over 2 to us, and that's something that just doesn't, we sat here and went through a meeting, a special meeting that we really have never done, and I pray that we never have to do it again, but we really didn't know what to do or what to expect, but, we got through it. But, Bob's contribution to Port Orange over his life is, I just can classify it as legendary. And, we're all going to miss him. All of us lost a councilman, a fellow, and Port Orange lost a great public servant. And, Marilyn lost her husband and a father and, uncle and all those things. And he's gone. I saw him 2 times. I saw him December 2nd at the parade. Had a very brief conversation with him before the parade. And then we saw him here December 4th. And that was the last time I had the opportunity to speak with him. And his voice was not good that night, and it was hard to understand, or you didn't want to press it. But it's tough to lose somebody of that magnitude. He would talk about somebody that would fight, and he represented the city very well, but he particularly, he was a heavyweight champion for District 1. Just use that boxing analogy, because he fought cancer, and he fought for District 1. I really, probably not the place to do, but maybe we can do something down there to recognize him, at Riverwalk Park, maybe one of the banisters or something. Just have, where's John? Have something carved into maybe the dock, or just a little memory item, or a bench at the park, or just something.
We'll figure that out.
With a little it would be neat to do, because, he didn't get to see Riverwalk Park completed, but it's going to be done at some point, and I just think it'd be cool to have just something little, with his name on it, little memory for Bob at the park, somewhere, in Riverwalk Park or something. I think that'd be a cool thing to do.
Yeah, let's figure out what's appropriate. I
Yeah.
don't want to rush it. And,
No, but
and then
just
miss an opportunity
yeah.
to something even better. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, something cool down there, and that, because like I said, he's never going to be forgotten, but it'd be cool to, if you're down there, or there's an event down there, everybody could see his name if they, walk on the dock, or wherever, or sit on a bench with his name on it or something. I just think it'd be cool to have something, for everybody to remember him by.
I could listen to you guys talk about Bob Ford all night. I mean, I really could. I don't need to rehash what all we lost. I know everybody knows what we've lost. Bob Ford was a great friend, and also a great mentor to me since day one. Hit me a little harder even tonight, coming up and seeing this empty chair right next to me. Recognizing again the magnitude. On a side note, Drew, I'd fully support anything that where we can recognize Bob in some fashion about an area where he was very passionate about. Bob was known as a lot of things, and frankly, as growing up here since 1984, when my family moved here, when I was 5 years old. I owe my life in some sense of another to Bob Ford and his policing, because I had the greatest childhood of my life of anybody could have growing up here. See a friend of mine down there, we grew up together, Mark. This is a great city to grow up in here in the city of Port Orange, and Bob Ford, being the top cop at the time, made that a reality, and it's the reason I chose to raise my 4 children here and plant my roots right here. Bob Ford was a great friend, a great mentor. He was known as being very tough, just a tough, rugged individual guy. I had the very unique privilege, perhaps, to see the real compassionate side of Bob. Last 2 hurricanes we had, he and I made dozens of trips to homes of affected areas, and you spend so much time debating and we spent a lot of time talking politics and talking history, having the same conversations I used to have with my dad, frankly. And he and I would go back and forth on a lot of things But when we made
He school
house,
you the same way your dad did?
he certainly did. Never got one up on Bob. But being in a position to go and, for lack of a better term, minister to people in a very trying situation when they're up to their knees in water in their own home, trying to figure out what they're going to do. You know, when the world's coming on you, to watch Bob in action and just comfort people and love them right where they are. Never had, you know, you never have the right answer in a situation like that. The only thing that you know how to do, the only thing that is acceptable at that time is just loving them and letting them know that, hey, you're not going through this alone. And Bob was a master of that, and it was a true honor to watch that at work, because that's really what a public servant is to be about. Not just setting policy, not just trying to solve problems, but you know, looking for ways to meet the needs of the people. And sometimes that need may just be letting them know that, hey, I'm here for you. You know, your voice is heard, and we'll do whatever we can to help. So I really am privileged that you know, Bob and I had those times to share, and it became a situation where we enjoyed it, our time together doing that so much at hurricanes, where if I got a call from a resident, you know, and felt it needed a house visit, I would call Bob, and he would do the same, and we would tend to make these visits together. So you know, I will miss that greatly. Port Orange, you know, benefited highly from Bob Ford. My heart and prayers go out to his family, and particularly Marilyn. So, yeah, long live Bob Ford. Bob Ford was Bob Ford right to the end.
Hug your children. All I can say, I know we got to put a bow on it, and we can keep going on and on, because I have some stories I'd love to share, and I have some stories that I'd love to share and absolutely cannot in this venue. But I will say this, when we think about what we've lost and what could have been and what will be, and the things that he contributed, yeah, there is a gaping hole in that chair right now tonight, and will be for a while. But man, when you can stop and look back at what we've gained from his legacy, you know, don't stop and think about the loss. Let's stop and think about the legacy of his work over the years. And when we do that, and there's a lot of joy in that legacy and the things that he's done. When he was police chief, and from '86 to '99, we didn't just grow in population, we doubled. We doubled the size of our city, and we set in pace and things that are the way we are today. A lot of it had to do with him and the people he had under him back then. And with that, council, I'd like to just take a brief 3-minute recess, and then we'll come back and conduct the rest of the business of the evening. That'll work. And we are back, resuming with council comments. Drew, do you have anything else?
No, I do not.
Scott?
Just a couple quick ones. So with my appointment at the beginning of the year to now serve on the TPO board, it was brought to my attention that we need a resident to serve on one of the committees for TPO, which is the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So I'm looking for folks that may be interested in that. But what I wanted to know is, do they need to fill the form out with Robin for that? And do I need, once I find someone, do we need council consensus that they will be our representative, or is that something I just find somebody and appoint them to that?
So that's interesting. They've asked me to do the same. So I'm glad you Tasker passed, because it's Tasker complete. I talked to Lois about that and suggested that we at least run the name by council to ensure that the right person is there. This person is similar to Bobby Ball acting on our behalf.
No way.
It's similar,
Oh,
not
okay.
similar.
Okay.
Oh, I love that.
But and I've asked a few folks that I know that bike ride to
Okay.
put out their feelers. So I will pass that to you, and you can bring it to council for consideration.
Maybe
Yes.
Bobby can squeeze it in.
Or we can just buy Bobby a bike and
Okay.
consider it good.
All right.
So.
And then the next thing is just for consideration with the folks here on the dais. I know Bob served on our police or a fire pension board as well. And in the event that we don't have that seat filled into June, if you guys would like for me to temporarily fill that seat on there, I'm willing and I can make myself available to do that. If
Yeah,
somebody-
they only meet quarterly, correct?
Right.
So,
I think,
yeah,
so
you might only have
there
one
should
meeting.
only be 2 meetings. If they're sticking with the schedule from last year, I think they will meet in February and will meet in May.
Okay.
So if you guys need somebody to do that, and you'd like that to be great. If not, we can leave it vacant. I can't imagine. Was there 5 on that board?
Yes.
Yeah, it kind of
Let's-
needs to have the
We'll
representation.
cross that bridge when we
So-
get to that,
yep.
keeping in mind we've got a
So I'm
a
available
plan
if you need.
if necessary. What else you got?
That's it.
Chase?
Nothing.
I think enough's been said this evening from us and from me. So with that, let's move on. Special awards, reports, recognition, proclamations. Item 17. Dr. Ed Prevat from Halifax Health is going to educate us on a very hot topic which we don't know enough about. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to thank the council for giving me a few minutes to discuss what I feel is an important topic and one that affects not only our community locally, but almost all communities across the country, actually. And that's the opioid epidemic that we're all dealing with. And what I'd like to briefly talk about is what Halifax Hospital has done as the local healthcare provider here to help address the opioid epidemic. But just to set the stage a little bit, and we'll run through this relatively quickly, you know, the opioid epidemic began to take the national stage back in 2016. In 2016, about 116 people died every day from an opioid-related overdose. There were 42,000 deaths in the country that year from opioid-related overdoses, and about more than 11 million people were misusing prescription opioids. So in October of 2017, President Trump declared the opioid crisis in the United States. And focusing on numbers here locally in Volusia County, in 2016 we had about 110 total drug-related deaths. These were not all necessarily due to opioid overdoses, but these were overdose-related deaths, mostly from opioids. And in 2017, the number increased to about 150. And again, this is right here in Volusia County. This chart demonstrates the number of deployments of Narcan in Volusia County in 2017. So Narcan is a medication that is used by emergency personnel, let's say EMS responders or maybe law enforcement personnel, to administer to patients who are found down or patients who are found unconscious, basically, in an effort to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose and perhaps save that patient's life. So in 2017, there were more than 600 deployments of Narcan by emergency personnel in Volusia County. So you can see that this crisis kind of hits us relatively hard here in Volusia County. These were drug-induced deaths by age group in 2016 and 2017. Again, this is Volusia County statistics, and you can see that it affects an age group that's a relatively young age group between the ages of 25 and 44 the most. So it's something that we as a hospital, as Halifax, and as a community, working with our community partners, not just us as a hospital, feel that we need to address. Nationally, some things that are being done is that the Center for Disease Control is releasing new guidelines for safe opioid prescribing by physicians. The FDA is performing a regulatory overhaul as well. And the Joint Commission is the commission that accredits most hospitals in the United States, and they have set some new standards for pain assessment and management in all of the hospitals that they accredit, including Halifax Hospital. That's just where you can find their report. But what it means for organizations is that the assessment and management of pain, including safe opioid prescribing, must be identified as an organizational priority by all hospitals. And the leadership of Halifax has certainly done this, with Jeff Easel mentioning this to me and other members of our committee that we've established to help address this more than a year and a half ago, that this is something that's important, and we need to work with our community partners to try to address this issue as it is affecting our citizens here in Volusia County. Also, the Joint Commission requires that medical staff members or physicians must take a leadership role in performance improvement activities to address this issue. And this is a little bit about what we have done at Halifax in response to this. We've formed a multidisciplinary committee with many stakeholders. There are several physicians on the committee, but we also have representatives from our nursing staff. We have our pharmacists involved, some research experts, our patient safety team, and our quality improvement experts, all coming together to form a multidisciplinary committee to address how we as Halifax can take on the challenge of doing something about the opioid crisis. So one thing that we have tried to do as a committee is to search the literature and look out there and find best practices for identifying patients that might be at risk for misuse or diversion of opioids, best practices for prescribing, for evaluating patients who are complaining of pain, treating those patients' pain perhaps with alternatives to opioids, and identifying those best practices and make them available to our physicians. We've established standards of care. We have standards of care specific to the inpatient environment, standards specific to the emergency department environment, and standards for our outpatient physicians as well, to kind of follow and to help guide them once in the evaluation and management of a patient's complaints of pain. We also subdivided a small group of our committee as the data group to look at the data. We have an electronic health record, and we can search that electronic health record for number of prescriptions written for patients, number of pills written per prescription, and even individual prescribing habits of individual physicians, so that we can track all of that and see if our efforts to help address patients' complaints of pain in alternative ways to prescribing opioids, if those efforts are being successful. So we've identified standardized tools to help physicians evaluate patients based on their functional impairment that might be caused by their pain, rather than the patient's subjective complaint of pain, to focus more on their functional impairment. Standardized documentation in our electronic health record. We've developed pocket-sized guidelines for physicians to help them prescribe safely and to even taper patients off of opioids when appropriate. We have developed multiple educational opportunities for the physicians. Some of these are online educational opportunities. Others are grand round live presentations by experts on proper evaluation and management of patients with pain. And then we have developed standardized tools to help physicians and nurses evaluate patients for the risk of misuse, diversion, or dependence on opioids prior to making the decision to treat that patient with opioids. So that if we use tools that have been validated to help us to identify patients that are at higher risk, perhaps we might think more carefully about using an alternative to opioids to help address that patient's symptoms and their pain. In Florida, there's also something called eForce. eForce is the prescription drug monitoring database. It was actually put into place by the state Surgeon General from this area, Dr. Frank Farmer. You may or may not remember him, but this was many years ago, sort of at the height of the opioid crisis. But this is an electronic database in the state of Florida whereby prescribers can search this database and look up a specific patient. And what the database will tell the prescriber is it'll show them every prescription filled by that patient for a controlled substance at any pharmacy in the state of Florida, so that we can tell if patients are doing something called doctor shopping, where they're going from one physician to another and trying to trick a physician into prescribing medication for them that they may have been prescribed by another physician. So what we've done at Halifax is we have developed or bought actually software that will integrate with our electronic health record that will make it easy for our prescribers, our physicians, when they're in the patient's electronic medical record, with one click they can go right to this database and look and see if this patient may be someone who has misused opioids in the past before they write a prescription for that particular patient. So when you put all this together, this is an ongoing committee. We've been doing this for more than a year now, and it's a continuing effort, and we constantly monitor the results of what we're trying to accomplish to make sure that we're having the desired effect. So I'll just go on to our outcome measures. We keep track of how often physicians are taking advantage of the educational opportunities that we've been able to develop. We keep track of any adverse events related to opioid prescriptions, and we keep track of the number of prescriptions written and the number of pills per prescription. And we monitor all of this. And this is basically what we've been able to accomplish so far, and this is just the beginning. But this compares the first 6 months of 2018 with the first 6 months of 2017. So I don't have the annual data yet. We're working on that now. But for the first 6 months of this past year, the number of pills written for opioids for inpatients who were discharged from the hospital was down by 12.5%. The number of opioid pills written by emergency department physicians for patients discharged from the emergency department in the first 6 months of 2018 compared to before we started all of this was down by more than 28%. So it looks like we're having the desired effect, and we are decreasing the number of opioid pills written per prescription, and maybe looking for alternatives to treat patients besides turning to opioids all of the time. What we feel that this does is it decreases the number of pills that are sort of circulating out there in the public that could be diverted or misused. You know, if your physician gives you a prescription for 30 pills of pain pills, but you really only need to take 5 or 10 of those pain pills, and you don't need the other 20, then they end up in a medicine cabinet somewhere, and then other people may have access to them. You know, visitors or whoever. Other people might have access to those pills that they're floating around out there, and they could be diverted or misused. So we're trying to kind of decrease the pills that are out there in the public that could be misused in some way. I think that's really about all I wanted to say, but I'd certainly be open to answering any questions that you might have.
Absolutely. Jason?
As they diminish the amount of pills that one would get, that would, I would imagine, bring the cost down to a lot of these prescriptions that people are getting, correct? Wouldn't that?
Reduce the cost of the prescriptions?
Well, they're not getting as many pills in a
right. It would be less cost for the patient when they go to have the prescription filled. Sure.
Yeah. Just great presentation, and that's obviously a national situation we have dealing with that. Just one quick question on. You know, medical marijuana has something that's been very pushed heavily across the country, and certainly right here in the state. I'm wondering if there's any data out there that suggests that in areas where that is being implemented as an option is an opioid epidemic and problem and addictions as has gone down in those particular states or areas where where those other options are available?
There's no data, to my knowledge, that would justify that. There are some anecdotal reports. You know, I've actually seen myself that there are some patients that have been able to wean themselves off of opioids using the oil that is now available in Florida, of the marijuana oil that is absorbed through the buccal mucosa. But those are just anecdotal, you know, reports that I've seen. You know, the use of medical marijuana is still very controversial because it, you know, it really doesn't have the data behind it from the FDA to know exactly what indications it's approved for and what the correct dosage is and what the long-term side effects are and those types of things. But anecdotally, yes, I've seen some patients that have been able to wean themselves completely off of opioids for use for chronic pain, chronic non-malignant pain, by using medical marijuana.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing any statistics if they would come out at some point. I was never a supporter of medical marijuana, but I'm always open to seeing if that is indeed going to do what people think that it will do. And again, I hear stories like that all the time, and I'm hoping there'd be some numbers out at some point.
Yeah, I haven't seen any large data, you know, studies that would really give us any data that would help us out with that. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
What I thought was interesting in 2017, and I'm sure once we know 2018's number, it'll be even higher, but 620 deployments of Narcan. And you think about that's basically one for every 850 people in this county. Those are just the cases where we got there in time to deploy it. Yeah. And one out of every 850 people, that's a lot. You know, that when we talk about a crisis, a health crisis, I think that qualifies.
You know, many people that I know, and probably many people that all of you know, have been touched by this in some way, or know someone who's been touched by it, or know someone who has a family member who's been wrestling with this issue. It's pretty pervasive, and it's something that you know, we're working with other, like Stewart Marchman Act, to try to help patients when we identify them in the emergency department as having, say, an opioid use disorder, as to try to hook them up with Stewart Marchman Act and try to help with what's called MAT now, medical assisted treatment of opioid use disorder. It's been shown to help patients that need help with their opioid addiction and to actually reduce deaths from overdose. So there are a lot of things that we can do. I think in our community, the resources are limited with Stewart Marchman, but there are other private providers out there of medical assisted therapy, and you know, I think it's important that we all sort of work together to address this issue.
Scott, any questions?
Are there any educational components being added to any of the high school curriculums that Halifax can get involved in locally to try to open those doors early in terms of the education and insight that can be provided by medical professionals to high school?
Yeah, reach the students while they're
Sure.
young and
I mean, I know for the most part, unless they change the curriculum, and it may have, but I know for the most part, you know, they take a half a semester in health, you know, and I'm just kind of wondering if there's opportunities locally for Halifax to get involved in the curriculum at some point to be able to try to impart some knowledge and guidance on our young people in the community.
That's a good idea. We haven't really been involved in that yet. We have been working with some of the high schools with their STEM programs to try to help them develop their curriculum, the medical component of their curriculum for the STEM programs. But that's, and of course we do a lot with the sports teams and the pre-participation physicals and those types of things. But those might be good opportunities for us to try to reach those kids with this important message.
Yeah, sure.
Drew?
No, I don't have anything further. Appreciate the info and the presentation.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
sure.
you being here, and I want to thank you, and I also want to thank Halifax for being a terrific partner in our community in all matters health for us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Public hearing, second reading of ordinance number 2018-35. An ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, annexing the following parcels: 6224-00-00-0051 and 6224-00-00-0080, made up approximately plus or minus 3.8 acres of property along with the adjacent Taylor Road right-of-way, repealing conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2018-35.
Thank you,
I'll
Mr. Vice
second
Mayor.
it.
We have a motion, we have a second. Second reading, any questions, comments, council?
No, none in second.
Anyone here like to speak to this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I still
There being
support.
none, back to you,
Yeah.
Chase.
Yeah, just, again, expressing the reservation going forward with this. I still support it. I'm glad that we'll get to determine under our code. I just, I hope there'll be, some proactive conversations with, some of the affected, neighbors out there, not as far as, advice on how to do it, but we know historically, there'll be, phone calls and emails, things of that nature. I think we ought to jump out ahead of it and let folks know what's happening.
Any other questions or comments? There being none, call the roll.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes, 4-0. Brings us by to 19, second reading of ordinance number 2018-36, 2018 Comprehensive Plan Capital Improvements Element Annual Update. Ordinance number 2018-36, an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending the Comprehensive Plan Capital Improvement Element, providing for fiscal year 2019 to 2024 5-year scheduled capital improvements and supporting data, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances and resolutions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2018-36.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Questions, comments, council?
No, second reading.
There being none, anyone else like to speak to this?
First reading.
There being none,
Oh, it is.
One quick question. I want to
that
make sure.
comes back to us.
Yeah,
Scott.
thank you. You were going awful fast there, Mayor. Quick
Right.
question on this that maybe Tim can, or somebody can give me some clarity on. I was reading back through this, and am I interpreting that there's that the HOA has a sign?
You gotta go back
I'm
to.
on the wrong page.
It's item 19
Next item,
I'm going to hold
Next-
that comment
next
for
item.
for next one.
the next.
for the appropriate item.
Well, there were so many zeros in that thing you read. Looking at my page, I'm like, maybe we could do more letters.
That's what we-
Mayor, I've got nothing to add to this particular agenda item.
Thank you
When
very
you said
much.
first
We're on city
reading, I'm
manager
like,
comments, right?
That being said, call the roll.
Councilman Bastian?
yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes, 4-0. Brings us to item 20.
I may have something to ask about this one.
First reading of ordinance 2019-1, LVC text amendment, chapter 15 residential subdivision signage. An ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending the Land Development Code, chapter 15 relating to residential subdivision signage, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance 2019-1.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. It's on the floor.
I'm going to see if she answers my question without even asking.
You want to place a bet on
Go
it?
ahead.
I
What do
only
you got
heard
to
half
say?
of it, so good evening.
She's thinking,
Good
"What's he
evening,
gonna
Penelope
ask?"
Cruz, planner. So the amendment is to Chapter 15 of the Land Development Code. Basically allows for residential subdivision signs with changeable copy reader on them. Right now, the Land Development Code only allows entrance feature type signs in subdivisions, and this is something HOAs have been asking for over the years. So this addresses that. The requirements make it so that the sign has to be only oriented inward towards subdivision streets. It cannot be oriented out towards collector or arterial roadways, and still has to meet, landscaping and visual clearance requirements and things like that. It can only be placed in land, in common area land or land owned by the HOA, and there has to be an approval letter by the HOA with the sign permit that's submitted. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I only heard half of it, but I will try.
You've touched on it.
Okay.
Why don't we start with Scott?
Thanks, Mayor.
I had some questions too, but I decided to wait until
Yeah.
the ordinance.
So the orientation of the sign was the question, and is there any relation to the entryway? So I'll give you an example. Where I live in Water's Edge,
Yes.
we've got one.
Yep.
But it's so far in, and of course it's oriented to where as you enter the community, you read what's on the sign. And you're saying they would have to turn that around now?
So,
Or is it far enough away from the
Once
entrance
it's
that
in.
they could have it either way? Because you can't see, I don't
yeah.
think you could see
So
that
the
from
setback
front.
from a collector or an arterial road such as Airport Road,
Yep.
near entrance roads, it's got to be at least 50 feet away from that entrance
Which
point.
ours is.
Got it.
Mhm, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's
once
the
you're
clarity.
once you're 50 feet in, you can orient it however as long as it's towards the internal streets and not out towards those
okay.
external roadways.
Remarkable how talented she is to be able to straighten me out that quick.
Tell you what, even on the correct item too.
I know. Yeah, very good. Thanks.
Yeah, just, can you give me a Cliff Notes version of the history of why, who's been asking
Just
for this?
a variety of HOAs over the years have asked. We actually
Including
had a
his.
variance at one point come forward from Water's Edge years ago. They didn't end up moving forward with it, but so we've either had a variance requests or just inquiries, and they weren't able to do it.
This gets them to allow them to say, we have a meeting on Tuesday, there's a garage sale at the community center. Right now, they can't get a changing sign to do that. So this
And-
allows them the ability to
better
do that
communicate
if
to their
they
residents.
should choose,
Yeah.
And the only people that have access to do that are HOAs.
Yes.
with approval.
Individual, with approval,
Mhm.
individual residents. They're not advertising yard sales and anything on that.
No,
that's it.
unless there's a community
Community.
type sale or
Okay.
something like that. It would be an HOA
Which I
sign,
wouldn't
so
bother.
whatever is on the
HOA
changeable
controlled.
copy would be controlled by the HOA.
You good?
I'm good, thank you.
Drew?
I don't have anything. It was answered.
Nice, nice response there. Questions, comments, anybody like to speak to this?
Thank you, Bill.
Nobody from the public? Back to us. Final comments, questions, council. There being none, call the roll.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 4-0. Brings us to item 21.
Mayor Burnett, point of information, what happened to 19?
What?
Did we do 19?
Yeah, we voted.
So is that where the Allen Bank from?
Item 21. Ordinance number 2019-2 is an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending the Land Development Code, Chapters 13, relating to landscaping requirements for residential lots, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2019-2.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, and they're bringing the big guns for this one.
Yeah, right. Tim Berman, Community Development. Back in October, we came before the City Council along with the Environmental Advisory Board on some recommendations to the code regarding tree preservation and landscape requirements for single-family or lots. Then, based on that direction at that meeting, we've created a number of code amendments and are bringing them back forward here in a couple of different stages here. This is the first stage coming forward. This particular is regarding the replacement or installation of trees on lots that are 6,000 square feet or less. These are a lot of the lots that were getting developed on the west side of Port Orange off of Townwest Boulevard and McGinnis, the Royal Palm area. Those lots are all 6,000 square feet or less. When they've come in there, they decided to put pools in there, expand the driveway, put the patio on. We're running into difficulties with getting those requirements met for the construction of the improvement, meeting setbacks, but then also trying to find a location where to put those trees. So what we've done is we developed kind of a method to allow them to kind of substitute to meet the code requirements. Instead of having the shade tree, they can plant understory trees. They have smaller root ball, a little bit less area then, so it gives us more flexibility where we can place those on the lot then. The other option is to upsize the tree. That means that we're getting a more substantial tree planted earlier then. One upsized shade tree eliminates the need for two regular sized shade trees then. Okay. And the third option would be to pay into the tree mitigation bank. That would then allow the city basically the option to do tree planting throughout the areas of the city then. So that was the kind of code amendment we did. That's going to get only for lots that are 6,000 square feet or less. The other thing, when we were cleaning up our ordinance, we noticed that the shrub requirements for single family lots, a lot of the zoning districts that we have are not even mentioned in there. So what we did was we cleaned that up by basing it off the square footage of the lot. 20,000 square foot above, 20 shrubs. Between 6 and 10, I think it's at 12, and then under 6 is at 8 shrubs then. So it makes it a little bit more easier to read the code in terms of new homes and stuff like that then. So again, this is the first stage. You'll be seeing a number of code amendments coming through here in the spring, and staff is recommending approval.
I tell you what, I got to admit that over the years, the Environmental Advisory Board is one of the boards in the city that has contributed as much as any of them, and this is another gem. And we appreciate their hard work, and we appreciate you working with them on this.
They are very helpful in getting this. You know, you hear there's a number of other ones that we're bringing forward that really kind of came from their input.
Appreciate it. Questions, council? Drew?
I don't have any questions, but I just like the change because, I mean, you know, you have these smaller lots, and I get it. That's the way, you know, people are going so they can get more houses on the property and all that. But, you know, those big shade trees on two of them or whatever on a little 6,000 square foot lot, you don't think about what that tree looks like 25 years from now when it's destroying plumbing or sprinklers or a pipe or a sidewalk or whatever. They're just planted and then they go about. So I like the use of the understories because, like you said, the root balls are smaller, they're not as big, and they're not, when they're mature, they're not going to be as destructive to the infrastructure on the lot. So I think it's a great idea.
Scott?
I like it.
Yeah, Tim and I talked at length about this. I think there's some good changes here. You know, one of the things that we saw over the last couple of years is that these big hardwood trees, which are what gets put in, there's going to come a day when they're going to have storms, no more for the next 25 years at least, hopefully. But and those are the ones that when they come down, they do a tremendous amount of damage. And what you can't help but notice is that with our code, when we're requiring these hardwoods, it's a lot of these properties, it's challenging as to where is that developer or builder going to put that tree so that in 25 years it's not something that's going to be a danger to the home. And we've already seen it in a lot of communities. Even when you try to get it away from the home, now it's tearing up the sidewalks or busting up the driveways as it grows, or it overhangs the neighbor's property. And you know, because some of these trees are going to end up having canopies that could be 50, 60 feet across. So it's very challenging. So I think having some flexibility is a good thing. I just want, my issue is and Tim and I talked about it, I want to make sure that this is not any kind of a scapegoat to not properly landscape and keep the city and the communities looking nice and keep our vision of being a tree canopy as much as possible. And I get that there's challenges, no question. So no, but I think these are great recommendations, and I appreciate the work that goes into something like this.
Yeah, one code that we did not change in here. We kept it in basically, the trees there. The majority of them are to be located in the front yard area then. So that helps in terms of the streetscape and stuff like that, keeping them in the front, front part of the tree, in the homes then. So that's, trying to get that, neighborhood feel if you drive down there, then kind of open up the rear yard where most likely the residents are going to want to put the pool, the patio, and enjoy kind of their backyard then.
Yeah, and I noticed too that, when you touched on the shrubs, one of the things we've been blessed and very fortunate for in the city is we've had some great builders that have had an interest in our community, and a lot of them don't just go to the minimums.
No.
They're putting a lot more in their landscaping packages. We had a presentation recently that comes to mind where Mr. Patis came before us and was showing the diagrams and the drawings of this project going in on. They're way above and beyond on where they need to be in an entryway in their common areas, and so I think there's some pride in that, and I'm appreciative of that as well. That they're not just going, okay, what's the bare minimum, and that they're putting a little bit more pride and effort into producing a really nice product for the community.
Value goes beyond just the dollar signs.
Yeah, for sure.
Same as to be said for the one going out off of Williamson.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And I'm happy to see our developers do that.
Chase?
No comments. Thanks.
Okay.
Good.
Any other comments, questions? Anyone else like to speak to this? There being none, back to us. No other comments? Call the roll.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Yes.
Mayor Burnette?
Yes, 4-0. Brings us to the regular agenda. Item 22 is first reading of ordinance number 2019-3, amending section 2-275 of the Code of Ordinances relating to local preference. Make sure I click on the right one here. An ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 2, Section 2-275 to establish a new subsection regarding application of the local purchasing preference, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for codification, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Even though Alan doesn't have a PowerPoint, I'll still motion to approve ordinance number 2019-3.
And I will second.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Alan Rosen, Assistant City Manager. This change in ordinance is before you this evening because last year we had an opportunity that we realized that maybe we could change the ordinance for the better. Council has demonstrated an interest in having a local preference ordinance. And what we realized is that there was nothing specifically in the ordinance allowing for local preference when it came to revenue generating contracts. It only talked about our expenditures. Mm-hmm. So we had discussions with the city attorney. City attorney suggested we maybe give some ideas, craft some language, which they did and they helped out with, as well as the purchasing department. Figure out a way that we could mirror the expenditure local preference and move that into a revenue generating local preference. So it follows it mirrors along, just in the opposite direction, basically, to say if you're within that 8%, 5%, 3%, depending on where your company's located, that you have the opportunity to say, I'll pay you more for the opportunity to work with the city.
Why are they broken down in 3 different percentage numbers?
So it follows along right now in the expenditure categories for local preference. You have businesses that are located in the city of Port Orange, and if they are within 8% of the highest or best bid, then they have an opportunity to present their highest and best. If they're within the state of, Volusia County, 5%, state of Florida,
City,
3%.
county, state, how local is local?
Yeah.
Any questions or comments, Drew?
No, there's some, I mean, we had, you know.
This is what we asked for, it
Yeah.
seems like.
Yeah.
Scott?
No, we had a very candid and detailed conversation my first year on council about the council's wishes when it comes to local preference, and I think this is in line with how we feel about that, and so I appreciate the cleanup work and the identity, identifying that this is something that we need to address.
Chase, anything? Okay. Would anybody else like to speak to this from the public? Anybody else here speak to this? There being none, final comments, council? There being none, call the roll.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Yes.
Mayor Burnette?
Yes, 4-0. Which brings us to item 23, first reading of ordinance number 2019-4, amending the Code of Ordinances relating to the Golf Course Advisory Board. In relation to our conversation a couple of weeks ago, an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending section 50-108 Code of Ordinances to reduce the number of members on the Golf Advisory Board and remove the City Council member position on the Golf Advisory Board. Amending, spelling error, it says amending. Amending section 50-109 Code of Ordinance to provide for initial appointment terms. Amending section 50-111 Code of Ordinances to reduce the number of board members necessary to form a quorum, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2019-4.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. This is basically what we asked for when this is codifying what we talked about a few weeks ago and removing the council person from that advisory board and let that advisory board advise.
It is, and we're where you wanted us to be through attrition already.
Okay. Comments or questions, council? There being none, anyone else here like to speak to this? There being none, final comments? Call the roll.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tramont?
Yes.
Mayor Burnette?
Yes, 4-0. Comments, City Attorney?
One comment tonight in regards to Councilmember Ford. I had the pleasure of serving with him and knowing him since the 90s, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
And I apologize. We had both you and Jake here, and
No problem.
we missed I missed including you earlier.
No problem.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
comments.
That's all.
Thank you. Jake?
Yes, sir. I obviously care very much for the Ford family and for what Bob did for me. You're absolutely right. I was stuffing my suit in a duffel bag, not hanging up, stuffing my suit in a duffel bag. I might have had a few choice words that most people have heard me use before. as I'm packing my bags and heading out of Port Orange with a 0-5 vote that you guys go back to the drawing board. And before I got down to the lobby, I was listening to TV, and there's Bob Ford talking to Mayor Green about picking the Navy guy. So I watched with my duffel bag with my suit in it, and next thing you know, it's a 5-0 vote, and Alan Green saying, I think he's north of Bunnell by now, somebody call him. So you all were looking for a cell phone number, and I was trying to get my suit out and unwrinkle it so I could come back in. He and I have shared a lot of one-on-one time together in the city manager's conference room. He has educated me on more things in municipal government than I would have ever known without him. And well researched is an understatement. You know, they call him Dr. Ford for a reason. He'll be missed. He was a member of my church, and I was always depressed when I looked over to the left and he wasn't there, for a couple reasons. Is A, I was concerned about his health, and B, that meant all the parishioners would then come to me because Bob Ford wasn't there. So he would, you all know he held court in his backyard and his front porch. He held court in the fellowship hall of our church and everywhere else. He had a heck of an ability, oratorical ability, but his ears were twice as big as his comments and his voice. So I will miss him dearly. I have two other comments not relating to that. I talked to the softball coach from Spruce Creek as well as the athletic director and the principal, and we've done some speaking to each other and some expectation setting on both sides, and what needs to happen in regards to the communication or the lack of in coming up and asking for these things. And we've all agreed that any future requests like the one that was asked the other day will go through the athletic director with the principal's knowledge. So when I call the principal and say, you know, Dr. Sparger, what the heck? He's not going, I have no idea what you're talking about. Let me talk to the athletic director who says, I have no clue. That way, the athletic department at Spruce Creek, and I'll be touching base with Atlantic too, they don't shoot all their silver bullets before they really need one. And when it comes time to need one, they're up here and you're going to say, we just gave you a bunch of stuff and now you're asking for more. Having said that, with your consensus and living with Mr. Ryan Hagan's request of no vote during city manager comments, I'd like to add the softball waiver back onto the consent agenda for January or February, whenever I can get it on there, and extend the fee waiver matrix to both schools. And I will adjust the budget next year to reflect their requests. We have a little bit of wiggle room this year that I think I can handle the Spruce Creek request and any future Spruce Creek requests that we talked about. And I'll ask Atlantic what theirs are, but they won't be much. And with your permission, I'll be adding that back on. I just want you to know that it's added back on and it has my blessing for approval.
That's great news. That really is.
There's a little bit of payment in kind in there and things that we worked out.
That's the way it should work.
So, secondly, and to end on a good note, I would like council to help me and staff and Chief Fuston in congratulating firefighter Ricky Francois on his nomination as the Port Orange Fire and Rescue Firefighter of the Year. Firefighter Francois contributed tremendously not only to the fire department but also to underserved children throughout Volusia County with his Firefighters for Kids nonprofit organization. I think I've put $1 or $2 into the boot before, not in the median, not in the roadway. Ricky's completed several classes towards his firefighter or his fire officer certification, as well as completing pump operations classes operated by the new training division. He'll be honored later this month by the during the Port Orange South Daytona Chamber of Commerce breakfast event. Just another opportunity for the staff here in Port Orange to shine. They all work hard, but this is one time we get to congratulate somebody publicly. So,
Awesome.
that's all I have. Son? Oh, Taylor Road's open.
Yes.
Tanya told me Taylor Road was open, so apparently Taylor Road's open. We had a little
Good news.
We had a little problem on Taylor Road. Apparently it was closed for a little while, but it's open.
Not a small problem, but I'm glad that we got it
Closed for a
fixed.
month.
Very timely too. I think you canceled a lot of people's plans who were gonna be here tonight.
3.5 weeks, we're here and we're open again.
People don't have to leave early to get home. It's open now.
There we go, appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Council committee reports, River to CTPO.
That's you, Scott.
Scott, you talked about that earlier.
I haven't been to my first meeting yet. It's gonna get a pass till the end of the month.
I tell you what,
You
why
need
don't
a
you
bike.
report on it after
You
you
need
get
a
some
bike
report
guy.
on
I
it.
need a bike pedestrian.
Oh, yeah, their meetings
Well, then
are
I'm
the
gonna
fourth
use your-
Wednesday.
I'm gonna use your slot here in a second then.
Nice.
General Employees Pension Plan.
Nothing to add today.
Okay. I want to go ahead and just share with you yesterday, the roundtable of elected officials met, and the reason why I want to go ahead and share it with you now is since it's so relevant. Usually I'd report on that in a couple of weeks. Yesterday was discussed the half-cent sales tax, the proposition of adding that to a ballot. Probably in May, the county council is going to take it up for discussion this week. My criteria before that could be sent to the voters, I had 3 things that I wanted to see. One, and this dates back to last year, was that I wanted to see a bona fide project list from all the cities in the county involved. That was done. There have been a few revisions since then because some projects always get different funding, dropped off, added on. We certainly are at a great example of that because we did not expect to spend $450,000 to repair a bridge on Taylor Road, but certainly that money is going to come from another project somewhere that we're going to have to shift dollars on. So the bona fide list, it's still there. It has been updated for the most part with all the cities.
And now, Mayor, we're going to add, by the way, all that pipe of the sort of Spruce Creek and Taylor Road, the PVC pipe. We're looking now to find a sped up replacement schedule for that, so it doesn't crack everywhere. So that's not on our list, but it sure as heck will be by the next time you see it.
The second thing I was looking for, which did exist, still does, is that there's a Citizens Advisory Oversight Committee, much like the school board does with their dollars, to ensure that bona fide projects are approved.
Gotcha.
And the third thing is that I wanted to make sure there was a sunset date, that this is not an open-ended deal, because if you've got set projects, set revenues, and then of course a sunset date, voters have something bona fide that they can make a decision on themselves about. What my priority is making sure that all of us do the very best job of doing it with a transparent process of putting something forward that people can make an honest decision on the project itself. They don't have to question the dealings, they don't have to question the process, because the process matters. A lot of the legwork was already done, so it wasn't like we're starting from scratch. We had those conversations yesterday. The county is going to have that conversation again because they're the driving force. So come this Thursday, they're going to have that conversation. May is a tentative floating date because OPAGA, the Office of Management in Tallahassee, has to do a review process of the final language before it can be, because now we can't just put things on the ballot that we like. The state of Florida has to approve it. And if they like it, then we can let our voters vote on it. That's the process now. So what we were talking about, if it's ready, we'd like to do it late spring. If it's not ready, then we're going to probably move to the fall with a special election of some sort. I don't think any of us in the room yesterday felt that it was wise to do any kind of special election over the summer months, but it's probably going to be a mail ballot election, and nothing is a done deal yet. This is the process we're laying out. We've got to do the work, but those three things are in my eyes, have to be done and complete before we can put something forward for the voters to decide. So I wanted to make sure we updated you guys on that. Okay. Finally, we've turned the page on a new chapter in Port Orange. There's 4 of us up here. What I wanted to do was just express to the residents of District 1 that Bob was your representative, but all 5 of us were elected citywide. So even though there's nobody here technically representing District 1, all 4 of us will take your call. All 4 of us will take your email. The city manager loves getting these calls and emails, but we are not forsaking any part of the city just because we don't have 5 people up right here right now. And all of us, I'm sure, are more than willing to carry the football for Bob for a little while and make sure that everybody gets taken care of. If nothing else comes before us tonight, I will see you all on Saturday at the memorial service. Thank you. Have a good night.